Hey Seth,
Yo, what's up, Brandon?
happy hat day.
Yeah, we're both wearing hats because we're cool dudes.
If we were cool dudes, wouldn't it be like this?
I'm down with that. I'm a cool dude. Wait, now I'm a cool dude.
Actually replace dude with dad.
Cool dad, cool dude. Is it cool if you have it going over your ears?
Yeah, that's the best, isn't it?
I guess.
Or we could do Sufjan Stevens where it's just two hats on top of. Have you ever
Okay,
seen his hat game?
you gotta see. You see, I've just seen that meme, right? Where it's like Satan offers him that deal. It's like, I'll make you the god of whisper singing and have unfathomable songwriting, folk songwriting talent. But in exchange, you won't know how to wear hat. And then before he finishes hats, Sufjan's like, deal.
Yeah, but it's a picture of him with I think three hats on, just stacked all in different places.
Dude, I've been listening to his most recent album a lot recently, and it's pretty
Ascension?
good. What's that?
Ascension.
No, Beginner's Mind.
Oh, Beginner's Mind. That's right. That's with Angelo de Augustine.
Yeah, but it's so weird. Like I really like his songs. I really find a lot of meaning actually in a lot of his lyrics. I think he occupies a really unique space in the music scene, kind of like Wes Anderson actually. And I love. I think that he would be an interesting kind of dude in some ways in real life, but there are some things about him, like sometimes with his artwork too. Like it's not bad. It's just like, what the heck is that? Like on the new album, it's like a drawing or painting of that weird angel creature with boobs.
Yeah. Yeah.
What is this?
Yeah.
So I think that's just part of who he is. He just comes from left field, I guess.
Yeah, and lyrically too, he's somebody who can do the most out there literary prose in lyrics, but then also have a song where he says, "I shit my pants." As a
What
lyric.
song is that?
That's on the Ascension. I don't know what song it is, but then there's also one on Carrie and Lowell where he says,
Well, I masturbated.
"You
Yeah,
took the words out of my mouth."
I know that it's such a great tender song, but I think he's just being really vulnerable there.
Yeah.
It's like what you do to cope with death sometimes, and that seems like a weird thing, but like you just do that stuff sometimes, and it's that album especially is crushing. Anyway, we better not talk too much. This is not intentionally Sufjan Stevens.
No, someday.
We can do suspiciously Sufjan Stevens after this.
Suspiciously. I'm trying to think of how we would work the word suspicious into it. So last time we left off, we were looking at Moonrise Kingdom and we did not discuss ratings. So
okay.
For us, we both settled on a 9.5. We did talk about that in the video. We were both at a 9.5 for that movie. Critics had it at a 93, which is actually the highest and is tied with Fantastic Mr. Fox.
It should be the highest, man. It should be the highest, I think.
Yeah. And then the audience score is 86, which for them, the audience highest is Rushmore, and then followed by Royal Tenenbaums. Rushmore at 91, and then followed by Royal Tenenbaums at 89.
I guess I could see that. I bet that's due to the children's makeout scene.
I'm sure that has some effect on it. But so far, you've got Royal Tenenbaums at a 9.5, Life Aquatic at a 9.5, and Moonrise Kingdom at a 9.5. Those are your highest.
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
So far, I've got Royal Tenenbaums at a 9.5, Fantastic Mr. Fox at a 9, and Moonrise Kingdom at a 9.5.
So I guess I like Wes Anderson more than you, huh?
To some extent, which you said earlier, you set that up. What was it?
Man, I'll tell you, we're leading this whole thing toward French Dispatch, which is supposed to release actually like today in certain markets, I guess, but nationwide for schlubs like you and me who don't live in New York and LA, it'll be next week. And I guess I just like Wes Anderson more than you because I'm seeing the movie on Thursday and you're seeing it on Friday. So I'm going to call and ruin it for you before you get to see it.
Yeah. So today we're talking about Grand Budapest Hotel.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm curious, when you said call and talk to you about it, sometimes you have an experience in the theater that can sometimes be changed based. So we touched on this with Moonrise Kingdom. the scene with the children didn't bother you when you saw it in the theater, and then you watched it at home several years later, and there was some kind of emotionally jarring kind of response to it. Maybe that might be too strong a language, but
just struck me as weird.
Yeah. So for this movie, you did not enjoy it in the theater, but you've had a kind of and you've been in the videos so far, you've been bashing this movie anytime I've said I like it. So I think you're gonna eat your words a little bit, right?
Yeah, I think I need to repent a little bit. I would have probably, previous to viewing it last week, I would have put it in my bottom third. But now it's either at the bottom of the top third or at the top of the middle third. Like, I think it's a solid, it's a good movie, and I did like it a lot better. I was thinking, I think I know a little bit why my opinion changed and what kind of threw me off. And I think there's a lot going on in the movie,
Yes.
and it's operating on so many levels that and even the time thing. Like, I don't know, I didn't pick this up, or I didn't remember this, I guess. Like, you start off with this girl who looks at a statue, and then it's the author that the statue is made of, and it's in 1985, but he's only on screen for a couple minutes, and then it goes to 1968. And then, like, a few minutes later, it goes to 1932, and you're just like, what? This is crazy. It's just, and then there's a little bit of back and forth after that before it comes full circle back to the author and the girl. And I think that might have been a little confusing. I don't know. It's just, there's a lot of stuff going on in timeline. So
yeah, and you may have noticed this, but the ratio, the way the picture is set up, actually is changed every time you go into a different time period. So present day, you're in full screen. 1985, I think there's a little bit of bars on the side. 1968, there may be bars on the top, and then by the time you get to 1939, it's just basically a little box.
Which is where a lot of the movie happens.
Yes.
Yeah, I did notice that. I didn't notice that the first time I watched it, and I just thought, well, this is kind of weird. Like, I'm only using like half my screen.
So, but you just communicated why there might have been difficulties enjoying it, but you haven't said what changed for you this time around.
Man, I was cackling like a hyena most of the way through. I think I just found it a lot funnier this time than the first time. I also appreciated the acting a ton this time, like just constantly going, oh wow, that's really good. Oh wow, man, he is doing so. The colors were fantastic.
Yep.
I think I also just realized it's okay that there are some oddities in there that aren't normal to Wes. I mean, it's by far the most vulgar and the most violent Wes Anderson film. And I didn't consciously think that when I saw it the first time, but I bet that played into me not liking it. It was just like, dude, this poor Jeff Goldblum had his fingers chopped off. Like, there's some really brutal stuff. And then the severed head, and then the constant, just the really vicious language occasionally. Like, it was, and the sexual scenes of the weirdness of what's his name and what sort of sexual encounters he has. I mean, it's funny, but it's odd, right? So,
and then him getting a blowjob from an old woman.
I love it when they're on the train and the lobby boy says, she was 84, and he goes, I've had older. Like, he just sort of dismisses it.
And he has a great justification for it. When you're young, it's all filet. But when you get older, you've got to, find I forgot the language he used.
Yeah.
Do you remember? The cheap cut, I think, something like that.
Yeah.
So I wanted to make a comment on that, but I also want to go back to this setting up of something that is unique to Wes Anderson's filmography so far, and that you're telling several different storylines at one time, is going to be preparation for us when we go into the French Dispatch.
Yeah.
So saving this movie right before it, I think, was good in that regard. Yeah. It's so not only is this movie the most vulgar and violent of Wes Anderson's, I think it's the most political too.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay.
Well, I think it's probably the most overtly political. I mean, Isle of Dogs was fairly political, but this, probably had more. And do you think, by the way, speaking of that, do you think is the ZZ supposed to be like reverse of SS with the Nazis?
Ooh, I didn't think so. That was going to be, when I was going to talk about criticism, that was going to be one of them, because I thought that's just not good design. Like I don't think it looks good. And
Hmm.
especially when you think about Nazism, obviously Nazis didn't come up with the swastika. It existed for years, even in more positive context before Nazis got a hold of it. But that design is so, yin and yang, basically, having the opposite things on each. But the Z, which is supposed to represent Nazi Germany, that ZZ is supposed to be a standout, symbolic something that represents this whole kind of movement, but it just doesn't look good.
Yeah, well, they did occasionally. I don't know that it's meant to replace the swastika so much as occasionally they had the SS that almost looked like lightning bolts for for the Nazis, and I think that's what he was trying to do there, was just not hit it quite on the nose and just flip that mirrored image.
Yeah,
But
and it's the Z where in the middle there's another little Z, it looks like, and
yeah, that was odd.
It doesn't look good.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I'll talk about my criticisms, because
Okay.
I truly love this movie. Even as I watched it today, I was thinking I just adore this film.
Hold on, is it your number one then, or should we wait and talk about that at the end?
So this is what I can talk about it now. As I was watching it, I was thinking about my criticisms, which I'm going to point out in a little bit. But I was trying to think, is there a perfect Wes Anderson film? And I think Royal Tenenbaums is probably as near as perfect as you can get.
Yeah, I can see that.
There's no perfect Wes Anderson film, but that one is pretty close. I can't think of any strong criticism I have towards that movie.
Did you mention any minor criticisms when we discussed that movie?
I don't think I did.
Okay. So then why isn't it perfect then?
Well, can any film be perfect? I don't know.
The Jesus Christ film is perfect.
Passion of the Christ?
No,
Which one?
just the Jesus Christ, because it's Jesus and he's perfect.
Okay.
All right, go ahead.
Man, but I don't know if I could think of minor criticisms.
So then is this tied? No, you do have criticism of this one, so this is not your number one then. I think you've answered that question.
I think this would be number two.
Okay.
So Royal Tenenbaums number one, Grand Budapest Hotel number two. But we'll recap this at the end. So some criticisms for me would be that ZZ, in all of Wes Anderson's history, that for doing such strong imagery and things that seem to connect, that just doesn't look good. The other criticism is the small tools that they use for the prison escape. I mean, I know Wes Anderson is whimsical, but that borders on absurdity. It's just like.
But what else? That's all they could get into there.
That's all they could get.
So I mean, it makes sense story-wise.
Story-wise, it makes sense, but it doesn't add up logically.
I mean, I guess it depends on how much you have to tunnel through. I mean, if you're only tunneling through like a foot of concrete, and then you have a cavity below it that you can just fall into, then that's a little more realistic than if you're tunneling through like 20 feet of concrete.
I guess it brings up the Shawshank Redemption, right?
Yeah.
And maybe it's not the tunneling through. Maybe it's the when they take off the prison bars, all of them are just sitting there chopping. It just, that with the movie so far, when you have all that vulgarity and all those adult themes, all of these big men, tiny, huddled around this hole with these tiny tools, it just seems absurd to me.
It seems childish or something.
Yeah.
I get it.
For some reason, Harvey Keitel has his shirt off in that scene, and I think it was really cold in the room, which is why his muscles are constantly twitching. Did you notice that?
No. He just seemed like a shifty dude who was always moving, so I just figured that was part of it.
Oh, okay. That could be it. The last criticism is one that I don't know if I would have thought about the first, and actually I'll say with 100% certainty, I wouldn't have thought about prior to the last couple of years, and thinking more about Black Lives Matter, learning more about people of color, and kind of embracing ideologies within that. uh, within those kind of populations.
Okay.
So at some point, and this comes right off of me watching Malcolm X. Have you ever seen Malcolm X by Spike Lee?
Is that the one with Denzel?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, a long time ago. Yeah.
Okay. Do you remember the scene when he goes to prison and he's introduced to the first guy who's teaching him about the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, Islam, and basically opens up the story the first story I ever remember hearing about Malcolm X was that he read the entire dictionary in the prison.
Oh, wow.
While he was in prison. And it shows that, and obviously the guy, I forget his name, but the guy who was teaching him and leading him was saying, you've got to learn the white man's language if you're gonna, break it apart. And so in that, the first thing he does is look up white in the dictionary and looks up black. And so white is connected to purity, innocence, all that, and then black is connected to evil. And I don't know if evil is used, but implied, basically.
Sin and dirty and that kind of
Yes.
stuff.
Yes. Yeah. And so there's a scene where he's talking about, Gustav is talking about Boy of Apple. And he says, and it just caught me this time, he says, skin as white as that milk.
Yeah. Yeah. I know. I did wonder about that. I mean, it's really fascinating too, especially when they're in the context they're in, where the Nazis are sort of playing up the goodness of really fair skin and blonde hair and all these, it's funny to even like racialize hair because, Africans don't really normally have naturally blonde hair, right? So and kind of, the blue eyes thing is pretty rare among non-white cultures. So that's non-European cultures, I should say, I guess. So it's, I did think that was odd, but it's one of those things. It's if you're talking about your complexion and stuff, I mean, it's not wrong. It's just weird to hold it up as such I guess he means more like unflawed, not like not having blemishes.
Well, and see, but that's also, we could talk about this at length, is what do those ideas communicate to people, and human beings think in obviously symbolic, our whole thinking is symbolic.
Yeah.
So when you say white and black and then say white is connected to purity and black is connected to darkness, that's all throughout mythology, religion, spirituality, all that. But what is that? How do we also have the ability, our more rational brain doesn't do this, but there's also the ability to take that language and put it on skin color.
Yeah.
Which has been done throughout history. So, and maybe for Gustav, that's part of his character. He's a product of his times, but it seems so weird. He was talking to someone who is a refugee in the movie, but is also a person of color.
Yeah.
And he's communicating that to him and talking about skin as fair, as white as that milk, and with the implication that makes it pure.
Yeah, or good. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah. I think having watched that right after watching Malcolm X, and just after the past 2 years in America, which it's sad that I'm only waking up to it now because this has been, centuries, but that didn't sit well.
I guess it's, you're saying Gustav is like kind of a man of his time. I also think that he's not. So in stories, you have to be really careful about what the character's saying it means. So if the character's the hero or even just the protagonist, sometimes that can mean like if he says something's good, it's implied that sort of like it is objectively good. Whereas say if like the villain says something is good, then it's implied that that thing is actually probably bad, Yeah. And so but then there's all that room in between for guys like this who are like, he's not really held up as like necessarily a good guy. I mean, the Indian guy does highly respect him, of course, but not Indian. I
would assume, I think it's a made up country, but I would assume somewhere like Pakistan or Afghanistan, or Middle East origins.
So yeah, he does hold him up as with a lot of respect, but he obviously does things that are not ideal. So this may be one of those things where he just doesn't get it, and that's the deal.
This is such a great, so those are my minor criticisms. And you said previous to us starting this that, I might lead some of the conversation since I'm a big fan of this movie. And for you, you're kind of coming in around on a second realization or a different realization on it. But so I'll lead some of this and say that Gustav H is the oh man, just such a perfect character to embody what that time was. So obviously the movie is based. What's making you smile?
Just like that. I mean, what is the actor's name even?
Ralph Fiennes.
Oh, is that Ralph Fiennes? I kept thinking like, I know this guy. I can't. Okay, man. So like
Voldemort.
Yeah. Well, I don't really care about Harry Potter, but I know I've seen him in lots of other movies.
There goes half of our viewership. We're down to 10 views.
I just think he did such a great job, and the character is so ambiguous. Like, there's that opening scene where he's looking at the woman's nails or whatever, and I just thought, oh yeah, totally gay, because he's like, oh, look, I don't know, he has this really flamboyant response. But then later you see him like romancing these older women, and even Adrian Brody's character is confused about whether he's gay or not, which I think is a hilarious interchange, in that conversation. So yeah, I mean, you're right. I think it's a fantastic character and it's portrayed magnificently.
Yeah, and there are those little subtle communications of the stereotypical gay person that exists within him, and then also some versions of the stereotypical man, the ego and the sexual drives, all those other things. So there is a lot of ambiguity, but at the end of the film, Wes Anderson says that this movie was based on the writings of Stefan Zweig, who was, if I remember correctly, I read, because of this movie, and I remember reading this when the movie was coming out, I read two of his works. One was a book of short stories that I couldn't get into, and then another one was called The World of Yesterday that I started but couldn't get into. And I think he was from so it's not Austria, that's where Mozart was, but then he moved to the more prominent country.
Switzerland?
No, not Switzerland. It starts with a V.
Vienna?
Vienna. So I think Stefan Zweig was from Vienna, if I remember correctly.
Okay.
But the world of yesterday, I think, is all about this idea. And for me, this resonates personally because of, I think 20th century Europe is about the most fascinating time in human history. Fascinating, not in a positive sense. There's a lot of horrible things that happen in this time, but fascinating in the sense that man's technology is at a place it's never been before. And then also man's destruction is a place that it's never been before.
Yeah.
So there are these two things going on. And I think the world of yesterday was all of the idea that we've gotten to this, there was all this confidence in progress and man's ability. And then after that, you have these slow things like Titanic, which is, we could talk about themes of technology and nature there. World War II, talk about themes of man's own biological hatred or whatever. We could talk about that later. But Gustav H represents this, and it even says at the end of the movie, like his time was gone well before he came into it, but he sure kept up the facade. So Gustav is kind of like this representation of the decency of humankind before Nazis and individuals took all the color out of the life, which is even represented in the movie where there's a short segment that's black and white.
Yeah. Which was also some genius filmmaking in some ways. So two quick notes on that. One is that Vienna is actually a city in Austria.
Okay.
So he would be from Austria. But I found his words about Gustav at the end really charming and delightful, but it's the same kind of charm I feel when I watch something like Downton Abbey, where you do watch this world and you realize it's not around anymore, and there was some charm to it, but in it, like this world existed pre-World War II, and even for most of Downton Abbey pre-World War I, but that comes with some serious critiques that like most of the world didn't have the opportunity to live this way. This is among the aristocracy. So yes, they were very refined, but that's partly because they're hoarding an awful lot of wealth, and there's like, peasants outnumber them 9-1 in all these European countries.
Yeah, to some extent, there was no knowledge of that. That was kept out of out of view or out of sight.
Yeah. So that's it's one of those things where you're like, man, this is really like cozy and delightful and charming, but it's you can be sad that it's gone, but also understand that it was kind of not great it wasn't fair in the first place. So
yeah, and that is really the result of, you think about people growing up in post-World War II who not only were a bunch of religions starting, but there was a real kind of, I just think about the books written during that time, The Banality of Evil. I'm trying to think of some other psychological books that were written that really addressed that issue that we had suppressed. I think as a nation, not we, but mainly white European individuals had thought that they were at this great height, but they had, as we said just previously, neglected all the poverty, all that other stuff, but also neglected their own kind of fascism within themselves, because it became immediately clear through the suppression of literature, burning books, burning paintings, and then also burning people that happened through World War II, which is just even hard enough. That's hard enough to say. So I think there was some kind of recognizing the full, I think of Paul here, or actually I think of two things, Paul from the Bible and existential counseling, or existential, what's it called?
Existentialism?
It is existentialism, but there's a form of it that you can use for counseling. And it's in the tradition of Irvin Yalom, Viktor Frankl, Rollo May. And I think it's existential psychotherapy, but it's the idea that there's anxiety over several things, but one of those is that we have freedom and we can choose. And so there's anxiety over the idea that we can choose things. And Paul even says this, is that everything is permissible, but not everything is beneficial.
Yeah.
So as children, and Sam and I were talking about this today, when you have a child, you want them, it's good for them to know that there are boundaries. You can't let them do whatever, because if you did, that would just be too much chaos for them. They'll hate you for it, but they need to know that you're going to wake them up at 8, get them ready for school. They need to know those things. When you're an adult, you'll start to deal with these things that, there's really the boundaries that were created around me about not harming others, or not going to work, or going to work or whatever. Those are all imaginary. I can do whatever I want, which is truly terrifying. And you have to work that out on your own. And I think Paul does work that out, and that everything is permissible, but not everything is beneficial. So you start to figure out, like, and even within Buddhism, there's talk about skillful effort and unskillful actions. And so you have to determine, based on your own experience, what cause and effect is skillful and what is not.
Yeah.
Man, I just unpacked a lot, and I'm not sure how that relates to Grand Budapest Hotel. Where was I going with this? I have no idea how I got there.
Well, it's the world that Gustav is sort of portraying. As
and so there's even an instance in the film where he's talking to Zero, and he goes, see, there's still glimmers of this civilization within this, and he's trying to complete that, but then he goes, fuck it. So there's that tension in him.
Yeah, you notice that's a recurring theme where, like, he and the other characters are trying to bring poetry and beauty into what's going on, but it keeps being interrupted by brutality. Yes. Or occasionally, when it's not interrupted, you just realize in the midst of it, like, it's not worth it. Like, there's no point to me doing this poetry, because it's all fucking pointless.
Yes. And I that's why I really enjoy this film, because I think that communicates on a visual level, as well as so many other levels, what Stefan Zweig was trying to write in The World of Yesterday, is that we thought we were here, and then we were brutally reminded of these things that we had suppressed and put out of sight. and it came back in a terrifying way. But before I've already done too much on that, but I do want to say, like, isn't this a well-written script? Like, doesn't it just read like a well-written novel?
It really is. I mean, the lines are just fantastic. I mean, yes, they're delivered fantastically, but it's just just so many lines that stick out. Like even just something simple, like when the soldiers board the train, "Get your hands off my lovey boy!" Like it's just such a great. Like they're just, regularly I was just like giggling nonstop at just the wordplay that's evident and everything, and how people interrupt each other and all of those things. Just really wonderful.
But there's also narration of "he said" or "I remarked," just like you would read in a book.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there is, Wes Anderson was hopefully trying to go for this idea of this really, I mean, we are looking at a book, which has been done in Royal Tenenbaums, Fantastic Mr. Fox. I'm trying to think what else. Maybe that's it. But here it's less the imagery of it, whereas Royal Tenenbaums, you get the library book and you open it. Here it's really in the words and they're saying, and I do love that it begins with this fan who's reading the book and then goes to the tombstone, and where this person has obviously been like idolized, where people are leaving hotel keys. But I wonder, why would this book be so celebrated? What's the main theme of the book? Is it kind of what we've already talked about?
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, it does speak a lot to the human condition, doesn't it? And society, and how we ultimately, I think we're just we're all sort of powerless in these larger tidal waves that happen, and these sea changes happen and you get washed out or pushed this way or that way, and you just sort of respond the best way you can. Even though Gustav's trying to maintain this illusion at the Grand Budapest, as soon as he's out of the Grand Budapest, things start to go awry, and then he ends up in prison. He's got a black eye and he's living, he even is ashamed of himself. He stinks when he escapes, and I think that's all just sort of part and parcel of, we like to create these environments where we thrive and feel comfortable, but life moves us out of them because there's just these things happening that are beyond our control, and they're huge. And I think that's probably resonates with pretty much everybody who watches the film.
Yeah. I agree.
I do also think, there's a nature where it is a little bit of it's more of a war movie than any other Wes Anderson movies. It's not really a war movie, but you do have soldiers boarding trains and tanks and stuff like that. And
it does say the last day of what was it that it says on the front line, using this kind of military terminology.
Yeah. And you just, you're kind of like, it just always, for me, especially with World War II stuff, I get it. It's really important. It's fascinating, but it's so overdone in movies. It feels cliche to me, even when you're doing it like Wes Anderson in a sort of theoretical way. Like, it's funny how he uses real dates, but he doesn't use real country names. I think that's so fascinating.
Which, you can't think about this too much because I don't think Wes Anderson does this, but there are a lot of dialects for this little town in Germany. Like, you have Owen Wilson, who's obviously just a Texas, you can hear the way he talks, but also you have Zero, F. Murray Abraham, Ray Fiennes, all these, and Bill Murray, all these people, and Saoirse Ronan, who has, a Scott-Irish kind of accent. So all these different accents coming into this one town and this imaginary town in Germany. Yeah,
it's is that whether are they all supposed to be from the same town? I thought when he was calling those different guys, they're from like around the country maybe or whatever.
Yeah, I guess I assume they're all still in Germany, but that's probably not a safe assumption.
I'm also not entirely sure it's Germany. I think it's meant to be like more Eastern Europe, almost like Poland or something like that.
Yeah.
And so they're being invaded.
So that would be a good point. So Grand Budapest would probably be somewhere around, Poland, whereas Madam, I've forgotten their name, but Adrian Brody's character, his family is more in Germany.
Yeah. And that's where they travel to. It's probably like just across the border or something, or maybe Czechoslovakia, something like that,
Yeah.
just there are so many like fascinating pieces of like Adrian Brody's character and his get up, with the mustache, and then the calling him a fucking faggot, and then he probably had sex with her or whatever, and then he's like, wait, am I supposed to be a fucking faggot? You are, but you're bisexual. Like, he has to like think about it. He's like, the logistics of how do I maintain that he's gay but also accuse him of screwing my mom. Like, it's so funny.
Yeah.
And then like the henchman he has, Willem Dafoe, great character, and that scene where he's standing in the office with the cat, and then when it doesn't go his way, he like just throws the cat out the window.
Did he just throw my cat? Yeah. By the way, okay, so actually this will go into something that I wanted to bring up, but Jeff Goldblum has to deliver this monologue basically that's giving you more detail as to what's going on in the plot. But that had to be hard because that's just a one shot on him, and he's explaining the conspiracy that's going to unravel the rest of the film. So that's great acting there. First of all, you mentioned great acting in the beginning, and I think Jeff Goldblum, as well as all the other people, did a great job. But as I was watching it, what is the conspiracy? Maybe I'm getting lost. I don't know actually what the conspiracy is.
Are you talking about when he's got the wills and he dumps out the big box of all the different...
No. This is when Zero goes to see Gustav in prison, and he reports to him what Jeff Goldblum's character was saying. And then there's a one shot where Jeff Goldblum is explaining to this is
it's Zero, isn't it? It's like at a dinner or something, secret dinner. Yeah.
But he's basically describing how Surge X is, involved in all this. But he's kind of given us the conspiracy basically, but I don't know what the conspiracy is. Is it that somebody in the family killed Madame X, or whatever his name is? Her name.
So, man, I had this worked out when I was watching the movie, but yeah, so you find out there's that second will where it only goes into effect if she's murdered.
Mm-hmm.
And in that case, everything's left to Gustav.
Yeah.
And that is what happened, but it's like she made it out in secret and no one knew about it. Except for Serge, who must have been the witnesser, the witness of her signing it. And but then I can't remember, there's a reason why Serge betrays Gustav.
Yeah, and
it's because I think they had leverage over him with like his sister and stuff. And when he's in Gustav's presence, that other maid is there, and he's worried that she'll tell Adrian Brody's character. And she does rat on him when she said, I saw him in here. She's the one that tips him off that Gustav is the one that has Boy with Apple. I mean, he probably would have figured it out anyway, but
is the conspiracy who killed Madame something to taxi? I can't remember their names.
Yeah.
But who killed her, or is the conspiracy that Gustav is not the perpetrator?
Well, that's a good question, because I guess maybe I didn't ever figure out, so who did murder her? Or did she commit suicide to make it look like murder so that this would go into effect? I
assumed, because they're talking about, there's a brief mention of someone who comes in. This is Jeff Goldblum relaying this information to Zero, but there's information about someone coming in a back way and going up the stairs or something.
That's Gustav. It's supposed to be Gustav. I think that's what Serge tells them.
So I thought maybe Willem Dafoe killed her. Willem Dafoe's character killed her.
But he's acting at the behest of the son, and the son seems to really worship his mom. So I don't think that's what's happening.
Well, not if they were wanting their inheritance.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, that could be. Maybe that's either implied and you're supposed to understand it and I didn't, or it's not. It doesn't matter who killed her. I don't know, but yeah, I guess I don't have the logistics of all that worked out now.
So somehow while you're watching the movie, the actual conspiracy isn't that important, but
yeah.
I think between the both of us, and I think, we're not the smartest people in the world, but I think we have some level of knowledge. We don't really get it right off the bat. We'd have to do some extra reading to understand what the conspiracy actually was.
Yeah.
But it doesn't seem to be central to the plot.
No, because really you're just learning about this world that existed and how this character came by the Grand Budapest, and Zero came by the Grand Budapest, and how the person who gave it to him came by it, and all that sort of stuff. And that's what's important. Which, probably is the most convoluted plot.
Yes.
As well, right? It's not very straightforward. It's like a lot of moving parts and then missing information that you find out later and then have to fit it back into where you were then.
Yep.
So that's it's fascinating writing, but it's I'm seeing why the first time I saw it, it was just like, okay,
Yeah. Beyond that, Alexandre Desplat's music is incredible in this film. In the beginning, you have the yodelers who are or whatever, which is great. Yeah. And then you have some moments which, when they're going to the monastery, there's a moment when they're going up the whatever the name of that thing is that takes you, and you can actually hear the which is in sync with the music. Did you notice that?
Oh, yeah, okay. That makes sense.
Yeah. There's a moment, the carriage, whatever the carriage thing was, and it stops and it's going, and that's but then beyond that, the same kind of musical phrase is used again, or overall musical ideas are used with singing Kyrie Liaison. Did you notice that?
Yeah, I did notice that.
And I thought, wow, this, like, we've gone from here to here to here. And then just hearing them sing these old kind of Latin spirituals, not spirituals, that would be the African-American community, but like, what would you call Kyrie? Latin worship music, I guess?
Well, it's part of the Mass.
So old Catholic kind of songs.
Which again, like, Wes Anderson brings faith into it for reasons like it's not necessary, right? Like I thought
the same thing.
Isn't that weird? Like it worked well for him to like go to the confessional, and it's a very remote sort of location, and that makes sense. But like, you could have done that a bunch of different ways. It's just interesting he keeps doing that recently. I don't know why.
Yeah, Moonrise Kingdom had that. Grand Budapest Hotel, which I was also listening to Vampire Weekend's Modern Vampires of the City, which is very overtly religious. So I think we talked about this in previous videos, but there's an age somewhere, I guess, in your mid-30s where you start really questioning politics and religion. And it starts to like color everything you see to some extent.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if it's even questioning. It's just, I was going to mention that Vampire Weekend thing because I've been listening to the newest one after I finally got into that third one. So he's Jewish, but it's fascinating in his lyrics. He is sort of going back and forth between Jewish concepts and Christian concepts because he lives in a predominantly Christian culture.
Yeah.
So
even mentioning Babylon and
it's really interesting how he kind of weaves that. And I sort of wonder that with Wes, so Wes Anderson is probably not Jewish, but is probably some kind of actually like Scandinavian. Anderson tends to be like a Swedish, Danish, Norwegian sort of.
Yeah, the S-E-N.
Sometimes, but he's S-O-N, right?
He is, but I was just wondering if maybe that was a translation.
That is actually a difference. In the Lutheran world, there's I forget what it is. I think S-E-N is Danish and S-O-N is Norwegian, and translates from like the original Norwegian was S-S-O-N.
Yeah. See, I was thinking that there was a translation coming into America. They just dropped the S-E-N and put S-O-N, but I didn't think about what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah, there's sort of variations of the same thing, which is is weird in those communities that still practice it. They don't have the traditional last naming thing. They like, so Peterson is son of Peter. Anderson is son of Anders. So they would take that name until they were like, that was, so, you know, you didn't have the same last name as your dad because he would have been a Peterson. He'd have been Anders Peterson. And now you're Peter Anderson because you're, you know, like it's such a fascinating sort of thing, but we don't really do that anymore, especially in America. But anyway, I would imagine he probably grew up like Lutheran or something like that, because that's what those countries predominantly are. And I don't know if that's starting to sort of pop back up in his world. I mean, Bob Dylan did the same thing, like in his 40s, it seemed like, but you know, I don't know.
This is probably, I was just thinking as you were talking about, you know, where certain names are derived from, basically. We've probably gone more off topic in this video than we ever have before.
Yeah.
But I think that speaks to a good movie. Like, it's bringing up so many different questions and so many different things about topics we could talk on, and it's inspiring a conversation to us, from language to names to religion to psychotherapy.
You know, one thing we haven't talked about yet that was sort of coming up like that is, I had forgotten Jude Law was in the film, and his voice comes on before his face does. And so I heard him speaking. I was like, oh, weird. Is Jude Law a narrator in this? You know, and then you see him on screen, like, oh, he's in this. I didn't remember that. You know, because it's in the grand scheme of things, it's a pretty minor character, you know. Yes. But same thing with Jason Schwartzman, you know, but they're in there and they do a good job. You're just like, oh, that's weird.
So. Yeah, and I remember reading of this one, which I think is now a practice Wes Anderson has done for all his movies, where wherever they're filming, he'll actually invite everyone who's in the movie to stay, you know, in this central location for however many weeks, so that they're all bonding and getting together. And for That's people cool. Like Bob Babalon, I think is his name, the guy who was the narrator in Moonrise Kingdom, who in this movie is part of the Society of the Cross Keys. For him, Jason Schwartzman, Bill Murray, all these small roles, and even two of the kids from Moonrise Kingdom, one who plays the lobby boy and one who's filling up the tank for Willem Dafoe.
Yep.
They were probably involved in this community, but they had very small parts. Yeah. And it speaks to Wes Anderson, the fact that these big players want to come into this movie when they probably only have one day of shooting, and flew all the way to wherever. I assume this was filmed. I kind of remember reading about where it was filmed, but I don't know. Somewhere in Europe, I assume. In towns that still resemble those old towns, you know, where Nazis didn't destroy the entire town. These towns that still hold that cultural value of architecture and stuff. So probably some old town where that still exists. But not only that, there's several new players to this one, which are Jude Law, Ray Fiennes, Saoirse Ronan, and my favorite was F. Murray Abraham, who I loved in the movie Amadeus, and who does a great job. And I loved in Inside Llewyn Davis, and who does a great job in this film.
Yeah, he does. Yeah, I would put it up there, you know, with you just, I don't know. I guess it didn't make me queasy, or it wasn't like unsettling, you know, some of the violence and the language and vulgarity, but it was just like, I don't prefer these things. I kind of do wonder sometimes, like, what's the point of having Jeff Goldblum's fingers cut off? You know, like, couldn't they just
showing the head too?
What's that?
Or showing the head too.
Yeah. I mean, I do. It's sort of like with Moonrise Kingdom. It's kind of like, I mean, I guess it does make it stand out more. I mean, I do notice. So this is the funny thing is, I'm working on you know, we're recording songs and stuff. There's a level to which, like, you could do things what you think is the best and the highest quality, but if you just do that in every decision, it's sometimes, since everybody else is doing that, sometimes it makes it feel a little blasé. So sometimes you almost do something that's purposefully quirky or less than the highest quality or off-putting in order to just sort of shake it up and grab people's attention and make it memorable.
Yep.
I wonder if that's why he did some of those things like the fingers and stuff. It's sort of like, if you don't do that, does it have too childish of a tone throughout, you know?
Well, there's that, but then there's also, I think, the communication that the ruthlessness of these people, which also is, and resembles Nazi Germany. I think it's to communicate how truly awful these people were. That,
that could be.
This also, so this movie, according to critics, was a 92. So that's just 1 point under Moonrise Kingdom, which and Fantastic Mr. Fox has been the highest. So that's Rotten Tomatoes. This movie, Wes Anderson won the Academy Award for Best Screenplay for this one. So
really?
It's the first Academy Award win ever.
Okay.
Which sometimes, I don't know how faithfully you watch the Academy Awards, but he was nominated, I'm pretty sure, for Moonrise Kingdom. And I remember thinking he's going to win that one because Moonrise Kingdom was great. And he didn't win it, but then he won it for Grand Budapest Hotel, which is a great screenplay, don't get me wrong. Yeah. But sometimes people will win on the next one, even though they really should have gotten it for the previous one.
Yeah.
Like they were snubbed for that one, but so they kind of make it up by giving it to him. So this is the first one that garnered Wes Anderson an Academy Award.
Okay.
I would say.
Hold on, you didn't give us the audience rating of Grand Budapest.
Audience rating is 86. So the highest is, as I said at the beginning, is 91 for Rushmore, 89 for Royal Tenenbaums, and then 86 for Moonrise Kingdom and 86 for Grand Budapest Hotel. So it seems like if you're viewing critics and audience alike, these, as far as satisfaction, overall satisfaction, both of these are right in, Moonrise Kingdom and Grand Budapest Hotel are kind of like the best of Wes Anderson to some extent. Which is
awesome to be like in this moment and realizing it. So often it feels like you look back and you go, oh man, so-and-so was really in his element at his peak. And man, I wish that I'd appreciated it then, where it's like, we're in it right now with Wes Anderson and we are appreciating it. And it is awesome.
Yeah. I would say this is his peak because, Rushmore and Royal Tenenbaums are really good, but then according to critics, he kind of went down with Life Aquatic and Darjeeling Limited, and then was coming back up with Fantastic Mr. Fox, Moonrise Kingdom, Grand Budapest Hotel. Isle of Dogs goes down for me, but not much for critics and not much for you. So we'll see how French Dispatch has done or will do. Yeah. There are other people like Christopher Nolan is just the one that immediately comes to mind, where it's just. With The Dark Knight, I remember thinking, I am witnessing someone. So Prestige, let's just talk about this. Batman Begins, Prestige, Dark Knight, Inception. Bam, bam, bam.
And before that, Memento, which had gotten sort of a cult following by then.
Batman Begins is probably a little lower than Memento, but yes. So you have these films that Memento's, it's just extraordinary. Dark Knight is extraordinary. And Inception is extraordinary. Batman Begins would be the lowest, and then Prestige is pretty close to extraordinary.
Yeah. So when Dark Knight Rises is being made and about to come out, you're like, oh my gosh, he is on a roll. This is going to be amazing. You're so.
I remember saying on social media at this time, you're about to watch the best trilogy that's ever been made. Because only Christopher Nolan can make, because it's so rare for someone to make for every single film to be solid in a trilogy.
Yeah.
Shrek 3 might have pulled it, or Shrek 1, 2, and 3 might have pulled it off. And this has some history for me and you, because when we were in Anchors, early on in Anchors, me, you, and Justin were rating our top trilogies one night. So no filmmaker has really done it well. Whoever has, they're the rarity, that's the kind of. So I remember saying Christopher Nolan's about to do this, and Dark Knight Rises came out, and he just didn't.
And everyone knew it. And we were so surprised that we were in disbelief. We're like, I think I just didn't get it. or something, you know, like we're
I
trying
was
to
in
give him.
denial. You watched it with friends and you were saying, yeah, I just didn't. And I was like, no, it was good. Seth, it was good. So I was totally in denial.
Yeah.
And even just some language like that bomb is going to go off in the city. It's like, dude, you couldn't come up with something better than the bomb is going to go
I
off in the
know.
city. Like
I know.
the most typical plot device you can have.
I just, yeah.
And then Marianne Cotillard was wholly, she wasn't used well in her, but anyway.
So that I guess what we're hoping with French Dispatch is that Wes Anderson doesn't pull a Dark Knight Rises, and
doesn't pull a Dark Knight Rises. Although I've read some reviews, and for Rotten Tomatoes, it's not as high as Grand Budapest or Moonrise Kingdom. But it did say Wes Anderson fans will be pleased. So,
I will also say, like, Wes Anderson does his own unique thing, and as long as it's a Wes Anderson film, it's gonna be pretty good. You know what I mean? Like, even when he's not great, like in my opinion, Darjeeling Limited, it's still not a letdown.
No.
So yeah, I don't see that sort of happening.
I think Royal Tenenbaums, Moonrise Kingdom, and Grand Budapest Hotel, those three for me is when his writing actually matched what he was, the overall, it connected basically, because the themes connected with me and all that, it seemed to come together. In the other movies, as you're saying, the filmmaking and the acting and the writing is still good, but something's not connecting on the same level.
Yeah.
So French Dispatch, we have to see, will this one be a topic that emotionally resonates? Or will it just be like, well, that was really good writing and really good directing, but it didn't connect?
We'll see. I'll tell you, I already feel cool about the experience because I'm seeing this in a theater in Milwaukee. That's a super old Oriental theater that looks, Chelsea, my wife, found it for me. She described it as, it looks like a theater that Wes Anderson designed. It's got like those sorts of props, and like color schemes and design. So she was like, there's probably no more fitting place to watch a Wes Anderson film than there. And I was like, okay, I will do it. So it's like one of the only places I could see it that day. So I'm driving over to Milwaukee to do that. What
does Oriental theater mean?
I don't know. I think it's a historic theater that's been around for like 100 years. And I guess it was either in the like Chinatown district or something like that of the city, or, it sort of has that history, but it's not run by the same people it was obviously, 100 years ago or whatever. So they just kept the name because it's like a historic building now.
Oh, because it does kind of have some outdated, problematic terminology.
Yeah, I don't know. Look up the history on that if you want to try it. I'm never sure. Like, so when something has a name like that, like from long ago, and it's never changed, I often wonder, like, I think it's sort of understood as like an anachronism, like it's just or anachronism, maybe is how you say that. Just sort of it dates back to a time when that term was acceptable and no one's pushing back hard against it right now, or that term being used for this location, but I don't know.
Yeah. You can always tell when someone has read a word versus when someone has heard a word. Yeah. Because when someone's read it, they have no idea how to pronounce it. I know. Versus when, I do that all the time where I'll read a word and I'll say it. I'm trying to think of one example recently where I truly did brutalize the word, but I can't think of it.
Earlier you said banality of evil, and I used to think that word was banal, and so
that could be one. But how would you say it?
But I think it's banal, but then it sounds weird to say banality. So I do think when you add the ity, it's banality.
Banality, okay. Banal, yeah. And that's one where I've never heard anyone say banal. I just read that from that book.
I had a friend who once said charisma, and he was a really smart guy, but he read the word, never heard someone say charisma.
I had a friend that said Vega Bagels.
Man, who's that idiot?
All right. I'm Brandon Michael Williams.
And I'm Seth Andrew Hecox.
And this has been
Intentionally Wes Anderson. Hey, we did it, man.
We did it. Actually, I messed up. What's your rating of this movie?
Oh, that's okay. This is probably about like a 8.5 for me. And if I had to do a ranking of like those movies in order, it would what did we maybe watch like 10 films, it would probably be number like 5 out of 10 or something like that.
So not essential Wes Anderson?
No, I don't think I'd put it in essential Wes Anderson.
Okay, your lowest is Darjeeling Lemon. So let's go ahead and go over this since we're going to be having French Dispatch next week.
Sure.
Going from lowest to highest, you've got Darjeeling Limited at 7, Rushmore at 7.5, Fantastic Mr. Fox at 8, Grand Budapest Hotel at 8.5, and then 3 films tied for 9.5, and that's Royal Tenenbaums, Life Aquatic, Moonrise Kingdom.
Yeah.
So based on that, your essential Wes Anderson box set would be Royal Tenenbaums, Life Aquatic, Moonrise Kingdom, and maybe Grand Budapest Hotel, because that's the next highest.
That's my 4th highest?
Mm-hmm. Do you want to change your score?
Wait, what did I give Isle of Dogs?
8. Actually, I didn't even say that, but Isle of Dogs and Fantastic Mr. Fox are both 8s.
I was gonna say those are both okay. Actually, I guess I need to give this an 8 thing. So I wouldn't call this better than either of those. So yeah, this would be an 8, and that can be grouped with those. It'll be in that second tier of 3.
Okay. This one I would give, I wish I could do 9.4 because I would just do like a notch. I'll say a
9, man. It's not that hard.
No, I'll say a 9.5 because I think it's better than a 9.
Okay. All right.
So mine going from lowest to highest would be 7 Isle of Dogs, which we communicated that in the beginning.
Yeah.
7.5 Life Aquatic, 8 Darjeeling Limited, 8.5 Rushmore, 9 Fantastic Mr. Fox, and then 3 tied for 9.5, similar to you, which would be Royal Tenenbaums, Moonrise Kingdom, and Grand Budapest Hotel. And truly, I think that does justice to how I feel.
Yeah. So then you would, yeah, if you'd have, I would only have 3 in my essential since there's like a pretty sizable gap there, I guess. And you'd have 4 in your essential because you've got the 3, and then you've got a 4th one that's just half a point below, right?
Yes, and this is important because we talked about including one stop motion animation movie in the essential Wes Anderson. So mine, as far as rating, actually lives up to that, and that I have 3 at 9.5, and then the next lowest is Fantastic Mr. Fox at 9.
So how many films did we discuss? I mean, I guess it's weird because we got the short films. I mean, it's not quite 10, right?
We did 8, and then we did 3 short films. We did not do Cousin Ben. We did not do Bottle Rocket, and we did not do another film that was promotional for Moonrise Kingdom.
Okay, so 4 out of 8 feels like a lot to say for an essential, right? I mean, I guess it's okay, but
it depends on the filmmaker. I mean, I think Wes Anderson would be good enough that you would put that many. Okay. I remember when Creed, who was it? Somebody came out with a greatest hits. Maybe it was Creed or something. I was thinking, you have not had enough albums to make a greatest hits album. Like,
you know what's funny is I'm not even a big Dream Theater fan, but I remember when they came out with theirs, they said they called it our one hit plus 26 other songs or something, because there's only one actual radio hit they ever had, where they put out a greatest hits. So,
yeah. Similar kind of idea. Wes Anderson does have, I mean, he's not Woody Allen, but he does have an impressive, amount of films. Would you call him prolific?
No, honestly, I don't. So I was thinking about that a little bit as well when we talked about him and Christopher Nolan. Like, I know films are a lot more than writing a novel, but I think of someone like Stephen King, who I generally like, who comes out with a release basically every year, sometimes even more than one in a year. And usually it's a novel, which is usually pretty long. So it's an insane amount of productivity. And he's definitely not having people ghostwrite his stuff. He's writing it, And I know there's a lot more involved in a film, but like some, you're talking about Woody Allen, a film every year, and that's kind of nuts to do it that much. But so Wes Anderson and Christopher Nolan seem to do one about every 3 years, occasionally every 2 years, and that's I don't think that's that fast, is it?
Yeah, I don't know. I was also thinking about Bob Dylan, who usually does the record every 2 years. If you ever look at his discography, it's,
Uh-huh. Yeah.
um, I don't know. That's an interesting question. I was thinking about also Paul Thomas Anderson, who's been pretty consistent.
I
I
mean,
don't know what Woody Allen is prolific
yeah,
for sure. Not recently because he's been kind of slammed by the Me Too movement.
right.
But that's a good question. I really don't know. And what's interesting is I was listening to just bits and pieces of the commentary for this movie.
Yeah.
One scene I wanted to listen to specifically was when Harvey Keitel slaps Zero and says, "Good luck, kid." Because I was wondering, was that improv?
I
And
know
they
it's a weird thing, right?
It is. And they actually, Jeff Goldblum is on the commentary and he said, "Did Harvey Keitel just slap Tony?" I think Tony is his name.
Okay.
This whole time I felt bad because I couldn't remember his name. And he said, "Yeah, we did 25 takes of that. And every time he slapped his face."
Oh, geez, man.
But in that, a second later, the other guy who wrote the movie with him, who is also did Moonrise Kingdom, Roman Coppola.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. He said, "Is Harvey Keitel in French Dispatch?" So they were already talking about that movie. Obviously, must have been in post-production at that time when they did the commentary.
That
They
is.
were already talking about French Dispatch, and now French Dispatch is coming out, and Wes Anderson already rapping on another movie that he's done, who Tom Hanks is in it, which is surprising. Yeah, which I think that one is either in production or in post-production. So
Okay.
he does. Wes Anderson is staying busy.
Yeah, and especially with COVID going on, it's not like he can probably move a whole lot faster right now. So I guess he is kind of prolific, but 10, 11, now 12 films in about
20 years.
20, like 20. I mean, Bottle Rocket came out, like 97 or something, right?
I don't know. Yeah.
Like 20. So about a film every other year. That's pretty busy, I guess.
Yeah.
And if you do it too fast, there's probably a reason some Woody Allen films fail so miserably.
And there's a reason why Sean Penn did so horrible on faking the guitar part in Sweet and Lowdown.
Woody Allen's like, "We got to get this done because I got to start filming again in like a month. So I don't care what you can play, just act like it."
Yeah, I'm almost positive that was the process.
Yeah, I could see that. Well, man, I'm glad we were able to do this whole process together. I appreciate you committing the time to watch the movies and then do these Zooms pretty much every week for like 2 months.
We missed 1 week. There was 1 week we missed, but yeah, every week.
Yeah. So we'll have a good time here. And so for me, the real Wes Anderson fan, it'll be 6 days. For you, the quasi Wes Anderson film, The Poser, it'll be 7 days that we see it.
Yeah. I'm suddenly having, what's that syndrome? Imposter syndrome. I'm suddenly having feelings of imposter syndrome.
Yeah, you should.
Yeah. Okay, so we're going to do a video for French Dispatch, I assume, right?
We could. I'll have to figure out the timing. Yeah, we could do that and discuss the film after we see it.
Okay. Well, I'll see you then, Seth.
Awesome. See you, Brandon.
All right, man. See you.